Airlines Confidential with Scott McCartney is made possible with support from Pratt & Whitney, committed to working smarter, cleaner, and greener today for a more sustainable tomorrow. PrattWhitney.com. Infinity Flight, the leader in Cadet Academy flight training programs. InfinityFlight.com. Ontario International Airport in Southern California. SoCal So Easy. And by Cirium, the world's most trusted source of aviation analytics, Cirium.com. We also welcome your business's support. Contact us at airlinesconfidential.com.
Welcome to Airlines Confidential. I'm Scott McCartney, and I'm back at work after a podcast shutdown. Well, not really. We shut down every week for a day or two or three or five. Now that the government is up and running, I'm happy to say we are too. I'm also happy to welcome back Oscar Munoz, former chairman and CEO of United Airlines. Oscar, we have a lot to talk about, and I'm excited to share with you and our listeners a conversation I had this past week when we weren't shut down with someone you hired and nurtured and know very well.
Thanks, Scott. Good to be back. And yes, I've heard about the conversation you had with Scott Kirby, my successor at United. I can't wait to hear what he has to say about many topics. He's always great with a lot of the insights. So look forward to hearing that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a fun conversation. Oscar, I'm curious whether any good can come out of this shutdown for the airline industry. Congress finally approved a budget, and with controllers getting paid again, airlines recovered pretty quickly. Every major carrier has powerful tools that help with that, planning cancellations that make recovery easier and can enable the airline to get the schedule back in a day or two. Those tools are designed to help recovery after storms. I guess this was a big storm of sorts. Once the government was back open, Airlines for America, the industry's trade group, lobbying group, said it was pushing for a, quote, long-term solution, quote, to protect air travel from future shutdowns. I'll talk some more about this with Scott Kirby, who's been front and center with all the political machinations of the shutdown. A4A is pushing for legislation that would do exactly what I suggested, use the Aviation Trust Fund to temporarily fund the air traffic control payroll so that controllers can get paid and stay on the job. I'd be surprised if Congress does anything to protect air travel, however. Canceling flights is the strongest pressure point they have. I'd be happy to be wrong about this. I really would. But disrupting air travel has proven to be the main pain point that forces resolution in these shutdowns, at least in the last two long government shutdowns. And neither political party, it seems, is willing to give that up. That's really sad to say, but I'm afraid it's true. I'll just say this. Prove me wrong, Congress. By the way, we saw one CEO, Ed Bastian of Delta, blast Washington after the shutdown ended. Bastian said it was inexcusable, that was the quote, to demand that essential workers perform high-stress jobs without pay. He called the shutdown, quote, completely unnecessary. And he said he was frustrated that the airline industry has become a political football. It's worth noting Bastian was not one of the CEOs at the White House for the vice president's partisan pronouncements. Oscar, airlines were in the eye of the shutdown hurricane, and airline executives ended up participants in partisan events. Ending the shutdown clearly was in the best interests of airlines and travelers. But what do you think about airline CEOs picking sides in a political war? Did you ever find yourself in an uncomfortable political situation?
Well, to take the last question first, the uncomfortable situation, political or otherwise, that's just what airline CEOs do. And it's just one of those things. And, you know, when you run a company and certainly an airline, you know, you don't really get to pick sides in America's political wars. You do what you think is best. But you have to remember, we serve everyone. And whether it's a shutdown or the pandemic during COVID, immigration debates, gun control, I had an issue with one of those. And I always tried to anchor myself in just on the simple principle of you focus on the people, the people you serve, and try not to make it political. It's always hard. So do you get pulled into those things and those political moments? Of course you do. But the role isn't to be a partisan actor. It's to keep your operation running, protect your employees and customers, and then importantly, speak up when real human consequences are at stake. And that's the delicate balance that you have. So Ed's points and Scott's points and everyone else, I always advise and counsel when I had to speak up about these things, I made them on a human principle. There was a gun issue when one of our pilots' daughter was killed in a shooting, right? Immigration was about separating children from their parents. My views and the views of most of my employees were that that's not what we did. And so we spoke up in a careful and tactful way. But again, we're not meant to be political actors, but you do get pulled into it. So the best thought, Scott, is it's over. And the concept of making it not a pawn in the future, meaning the airline industry, that would be great to pass something like that because it is so disruptive. But it's not going to happen because in political pandering, it's such a great tool, right? Think of what happened. I mean, I was on CNBC and I just mentioned that beyond the uncomfortableness and inconvenience to us as travelers, which was meaningful and impactful to us, there's also the other side of the coin in the negotiation, which, affected the subsidies on health for 24 million Americans. Whether you like that topic or not, there is another side. And that led into some interesting conversations on that hit. We're always going to get pulled into sides. My advice always is to anchor yourself in principles that for me are human and deal with your business. And then explain it that way when you get presented, but people are always going to differ. And so, Ed and Scott have taken different views on many subjects over the years, as I with Ed and I with Scott even. The thing is, at least at this point in time, we are good to go for Thanksgiving and the holidays and when everybody's happy.
Yeah.
But the sting and the scar will linger as it always has.
Yeah, and I'm just afraid this is going to get worse. The idea of, hey, air travel can be used to force issues, and so that may be tough for the industry. And it is sad that be very simple to say, hey, we're going to make sure that's not going to happen again. But sadly, it probably is going to happen again.
Yeah, it will.
All right. Another interesting development recently was a settlement of a 2-decades-old lawsuit about credit card fees charged to merchants. This is an airline story because it affects credit card rewards. And as we all know, those rewards have been a significant source of airline revenue for some time now. The settlement is with Visa and MasterCard. So American Express and Discover, for example, aren't part of this. Visa and MasterCard and banks in their network typically charge merchants 2% to 3% of a transaction for processing the charge and delivering money to the merchant. It's called a swipe fee. Merchants have complained for decades that this was onerous. It was too high. Out of that swipe fee comes the rewards. You can get a 2% cashback credit card, for example, or typically 1% to 2% on domestic coach frequent flyer tickets, or waivers on checked baggage fees or early boarding groups that banks actually pay airlines for. The settlement still has to be approved by a federal judge who, interestingly, rejected an earlier settlement as inadequate. This one offers a bit more to merchants, but maybe not enough. It's not a done deal. It only reduces swipe fees by 0.1% for 5 years. That seems kind of inconsequential, unless you're talking about merchants like Walmart or Amazon, where 0.1% adds up to millions, hundreds of millions of dollars. What's far more significant for most retailers, I think, is that merchants no longer will have to accept all cards in the Visa or MasterCard networks. Under the settlement, there will be 3 classes of credit cards: commercial cards, premium cards, including reward cards, and basic no rewards cards. Merchants could decide which tiers they want to accept, or they can add surcharges to customers' bills depending on the class of card. Sound confusing? Yes, it will be. If it happens. There's already opposition brewing, apparently, among some retailers that this still doesn't lower swipe fees enough. And imagine the pressure on merchants who may want to stop accepting reward cards, but something like 80% of Visa and MasterCards pay some kind of reward. So you're potentially cutting off a lot of business, a lot of sales if you say, hey, we don't accept that credit card. It's a really tough call. Oscar, we already have a question from listener John from Rochester, New York about this. John asks, quote, if this settlement goes through, wouldn't it greatly upset the profits of the U.S. airline industry? So would it?
I think it definitely affects the math, but again, it's a process. This will take time. It won't affect everyone uniform. And if anything, we have known, especially in this industry, people will pivot. No one's going to sit still. Banks, merchants, airlines. And, Scott, I remember sitting in a room with our famous co-brand partner during one of our major and intense negotiations on this, because it is a lot of money. Yeah. And, someone from the other side, half jokingly and half seriously said, Oscar, your loyalty program is worth more than your airline. Trying to get a sort of a dig in. I don't know if this makes sense, but I said, yeah, it's worth more because it keeps the airline flying. It's not the other way around. And as I think of all of this, the systems, as we know, are very interconnected, right? Airlines just don't rely on interchange fees. Banks rely on travelers, and merchants rely on spending, and customers rely on rewards. So it's a very, sort of interconnected system. So yeah, a settlement will upend airline profits, but it will definitely change the math. But these partnerships are just way too valuable to just simply disappear. Everyone in the room needs each other, and that'll be something that continues, and nobody will sit still. So let's keep a watch on it, see what happens. And of course, whatever happens, then the renegotiations will begin immediately, and we'll create a new program. It is just simply too interconnected. It's not just about the airline, as you know. So,
yeah, my guess would be that maybe consumers would see a little reduction in awards and the benefits you get if the math changes on the profitability of the programs. It could be that. It could be that the banks raise the annual fee a little bit to make the math work, but
it will not sit still, as you know.
Right. Right.
This might be a good topic. Just to take a quick break from all of this before we get to Scott's interview. We are all preparing for this executive MBA program that you're kicking off with the history of aviation at the University of Colorado at Denver, and this will be one of the many topics that you have a lot of history. I know I'm a little nervous about teaching. Are you well prepared?
Well, that is the big question in my life right now. The preparation has been enormous, and it's been fascinating. And I am right in the throes right now of putting together my slides for the very first class. We have a whole course development plan in place. I have, all of the classes mapped out. We have timed out reading materials and all the different assignments and things. I'm working with this fabulous course designer, and this has been a fascinating process for me. And I have loved doing the research. I'm so excited about the course because I've learned a lot. You can see through the history how everything comes together, and that's been really exciting. And my course designer is like, wow, this is so interesting. I really want to take this course. So, but when we finish recording, it's what I'm going back to work to. so this is front and center.
Well, I was joining you in that nervousness, and glad to hear it. But now that I hear of the level of intense preparation you're doing, I'm now more nervous. And you're the first one, and I'm the capstone course.
Yeah.
By the way, capstone being a term I learned now that I'm in the world of academics. It just means the end one. I had a brief meeting with some of the advisory board, and we're really building an additional program of mentorship to a lot of the cohort that will join. And it's going to be real exciting beyond, if you're listening, you just heard what Scott is going to provide to you. That's amazing in history. But every one of the professors and teachers are going to be relying on that. Lots of outside speakers, but more a focus on providing some individual mentorship for people's lives and careers. And so it really is going to be a neat program where you get so much more than just the curriculum and the teaching, but a real insightful from real humans. And I'm looking forward to that. So I'm glad to see you're preparing, and I can't wait to. I'm sure I'll sit in one of your classes and jeer from the back.
We'll have you in the front. The other thing that's been fascinating to me is that we've been mapping out discussion questions and things like that. And one of the things that really excites me is that the students bring their own knowledge of their own jobs in the airline industry, and that's going to be really fascinating because different topics, we're going to have our own experts in the room or people who have had different experiences. And I think that's going to make it really special as well. All right, before we bring in Scott Kirby, I want to thank our sponsors. Thanks to Cirium. Cirium offers the most accurate and precise data and analytics to enable airlines to optimize planning, operations, and passenger services. The right intelligence drives operational efficiencies, enables you to predict market shifts, and helps airlines respond quickly to maximize revenue, manage costs, and seize commercial opportunity. Visit cirium.com for more.
And also thanks to Ontario International Airport for the support. Ontario International Airport is celebrating a decade of local control. Thanks to public support, local community reclaimed ONT, revived it as a vital gateway in Southern California, and ensured the airport is ready to soar even higher in the years to come. Visit flyontario.com/10 to learn the story and find out how you can join the year-long celebration of how a decade of local control has turned ONT into one of California's fastest growing and most economical airports, and also incredibly well placed for the growing population. I have a lot of family in Southern California, and it is a constant go-to place. And you've seen other smaller airports really thrive, Long Beach probably being another good example down there. So it's great to see this particular airport take control and take flight. So thank them for their support as well.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's turn to my recent conversation with Scott Kirby. Scott Kirby is Chief Executive Officer of United Airlines and architect of an amazing transformation of United over the past several years. He joined United in 2016 as president under this week's podcast co-host, Oscar Munoz. Prior to joining United, Scott was president of American Airlines for 3 years and president of U.S. Airways for 7 years. He started his airline career at America West in 1995. Before that, he had worked in the Pentagon as a budget analyst and in the technology sector for Sabre. Scott has a bachelor's degree in computer science and operations research from the U.S. Air Force Academy and a master of science and operations research from George Washington University. Welcome to Airlines Confidential, Scott. I can't believe this is your first time on the podcast, but thrilled to have you.
I'm glad to be here.
All right. So since it is a first time, we have to start with what we affectionately call the Ben Baldanza question. Ben taught me this was a really interesting question in this business. He would always ask people, how'd you get started in this crazy industry?
Well, for me, it was somewhat random. Even though I went to the Air Force Academy intending to be a pilot, I realized I was not going to be a fighter pilot, so chose not to go to pilot training. And when I got out, wanted to do something with my master's degree, which was operations research, which is basically math. So I wanted to do something with math, and it came down to either going to what was then called American Airlines Decision Technologies, which built all the models for math, or going to Wall Street and working in one of the quant groups. And I grew up out in the country, and I went to New York on my recruiting trip, and I looked up and I couldn't find the North Star. I didn't know which direction was north, south, east, or west. I'm like, I don't want to live here. And so I went to American Airlines purely based on that.
That's amazing. That's amazing. All right. Well, we're talking on Friday, one day post shutdown. And I'm curious how the shutdown recovery is going and what Thanksgiving's looking like.
So first, I'm incredibly proud of the United team for how we managed this. When we first heard about this, I mean, it happened in a matter, like in an hour and a half from the time somebody first mentioned it until we were told that there was going to be an order coming out. It was a few hours till it came out. And we had, essentially 36 hours before the first day of cancellations had to be loaded. And we got together and we decided that we weren't going to worry about the financial impact or the cost of this. We're going to try to take as much of the uncertainty out of it for customers as we possibly could. And that meant canceling at least 3 days in advance, trying to get all of our cancels loaded at least 3 days in advance. It meant giving any customer that was traveling during that period a refund if they wanted, even if their flights weren't canceled. I'm pretty sure we're the only airline that did that. But those were all just designed to take care of customers and, turn this into an opportunity to prove to our customers and our employees that we'd try to do the right thing for them. So we managed it pretty well. This was manageable throughout. Because we were canceling in advance, we got some really sophisticated tools now that, we can keep the crew pairings together, and our people did a great job. Actually, the most amazing statistic that I've seen in a long time is on Saturday and Sunday, which were the peak of the air traffic control issues, the biggest cancellation days of the year for the whole industry, were our fifth and sixth highest NPS scores of the entire year because of how we managed it. So I'm really proud of that. But I do think we're recovered. That air traffic control, the FAA is still asking us to cancel some flights, and so we're complying. But there haven't been any staffing triggers or shortages in the last couple of days. The operation is running smooth. I think by Monday at the latest, it'll be back to 100%. Somewhat depends on the FAA's willingness to do it, but I think we're back to 100%, and I'm highly confident that people can travel with confidence on Thanksgiving, and that Thanksgiving will be protected and be operating as normal.
I'm curious long term whether there's any worry here that the administration has grown to kind of like capacity reductions. They did it in Newark and now the shutdown. And I'm wondering if, in response to, obviously we talk a lot about the shortage of controllers and the inflexibility of the system, and that maybe they'll say, hey, we need to restrict growth for the next couple of years or cap capacity. Do you worry about that at all?
I think these are two uncorrelated events. They may have both wound up with capacity. Newark, for what it's worth, always should have been capped. I mean, it was the only airport left in the world that was a large airport that was overscheduled, that doesn't have slots. It's the only one, and it used to have slots. And the reality is at Newark, the FAA says in the best of times with full staffing on a perfect weather day, they can handle 77 operations per hour, and they were letting it be scheduled at 86 operations per hour for hours in a row. And that is simple math. It meant, if you did that for 10 hours, that's 90 flights that have to get delayed until past 10 p.m. at night or have to get canceled every single day. It was just unconscionable, and it was awful, and a basic misunderstanding of very simple math. Or not caring about very simple math. I think they understood it. So I'm incredibly relieved that this administration has done that. And then, of course, the shutdown was, temporary. I do think it's important that the FAA get back to full staffing. I was in D.C. again this week. I tell everyone, because it's true, like every single thing that you would like to do to make air travel better, that every person would like to do to make air travel better, if you added all of them up, they pale in comparison to simply getting the air traffic control system, the FAA, fully staffed. It will dramatically reduce delays and cancellations. I had to do back of the envelope math for someone in the White House, and I said, my guess is that it's a remarkable 500 million people a year would avoid a delay or cancellation in the country if we just got the air traffic control system fully staffed. There's literally nothing that comes close to that.
So, but no worry that that there will be some kind of restriction in the future.
I'm not worried about that. There are airports that should be restricted because they don't have enough capacity. But there's not any conscious desire to restrict air travel or growth. I'm certain.
Yeah. Any idea yet what this will cost United?
I mean, I have a guess, but I'm not going to say it. One, I hate making excuses, and everyone knows this is going to happen. It is what it is. But I hate publicly quantifying it because want to have a no excuses, sir culture. And so we try not to actually quantify these things as much as possible and just do our best to overcome them.
Okay. So another aspect of this was the politics. And I've said on the podcast, it seemed to me like the air traffic control situation was basically managed to pressure Democrats. And it worked, right? Imposing the restrictions, forcing cancellations. It really raised pressure. Would you agree with that? Were you okay with
I wouldn't agree with that exactly. It is unfortunate that it happens on both sides. It happened in the last shutdown. Like this, I don't think this is a Democrat or a Republican. We, for some reason, are the fulcrum of getting people to the table. I don't know why. I wish we weren't. It is both sides of the aisle. We become the fulcrum of the lever to get people to the table, and we are actually working right now to hopefully get legislation or a change to the process to exempt air traffic control and TSA from any future shutdowns, because it just creates an unnecessary economic harm to the country, and our customers are victims, and we're going to try to do everything we can to get out of this, us being the fulcrum on ending shutdowns.
Yeah, I mean, that'll be really interesting. It's sort of calling the bluff in a way, right? Because both parties do see this as, and it is sort of the retail government service. Nobody worries if the IRS office is closed or the National Park concession stand. But you start canceling people's flights and they feel it immediately. So it'll be interesting. With that high profile of the industry and the impact with the industry, it did seem to me that you were thrust into the political arena too. There you are at the White House and meeting with the vice president and all of that. Are you comfortable with that?
I am actually. I had dozens of calls over the weekend, people on both sides of the aisle. I wasn't the only one. Robert made a lot. Bob Jordan made a lot of calls. So we were. My guess is the three of us. If you listed the three CEOs who talked to more people in Washington about the shutdown, we're 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah.
And what's funny is when I first got this job from Oscar, I thought it was the only part of the job I would dislike. Everything else I thought I would like, and it's turned out to be one of my favorite parts of the job. It's maddening. It's frustrating. You're going through stuff like this shutdown. It just seems utterly pointless to me. But it's also the place where you can make a magnified difference. And I guess that's what I like about it. You get to talk to a lot of people. They don't always listen to you, and often don't, but sometimes they do. And they actually, I think, usually listen. They don't always agree, but they're hearing you, and it's a place that you can have magnified influence. And so it's turned out to be one of the parts that, while it's of the job that I actually like, even though can be maddening and hair-pulling, frustrating at times.
Yeah. Yeah, interesting. So let's take that a little bit further, because it does seem to me that you have increasingly become sort of the leadership CEO of the industry, if you will. There was a time when I thought Josh Ernst was kind of running a political campaign. One week you were out there on sustainability. The next week you were all over TV with pilot training. You've been outspoken about competitors. You've been winning, and it reminds me of when I was covering Bob Crandall.
Well, that's quite a compliment.
No, I mean it that way. But to me, you're sort of becoming today's Bob Crandall. Is that a fair assessment?
Well, I'll let you make that assessment.
Okay.
I'm honored by it. But the question was, do I relish it? And the truth is, yes, I do. I joked in a room at IATA with like 25 airline CEOs. It wasn't entirely a joke. Like, all airline CEOs crave the spotlight. The only difference between you and me is that I'm willing to admit
it. Okay. And what kind of reaction did you get?
I got a few laughs from people that are a little more self-aware, and then some other people. And by the way, the people that argued with me about it were like, "Oh my goodness! Like, you crave the spotlight more than anyone I know." Yeah. but a few that were actually self-aware.
And there's a lot to it, because I always think of, and I think you and I've talked about this before, I always think of an airline CEO as sort of the football coach. Your first job is motivating employees, right?
Yeah.
And the CEOs I've seen over the years who lose labor, once you lose labor, it's over. It may take a couple of years or whatever, but it's over. And so that public profile is really important to your employees and to your customers.
I agree. And that's the more serious way of talking about it, which I think is correct. We are high profile regardless, and you can do everything you want to communicate with employees, but they're going to trust also what they see you doing in the public arena, what they read in the newspaper, and that's important. I believe a very high level of trust amongst our. They don't always agree with me on everything. I don't always agree with them, but a high level of trust, and do a lot of communication. A lot of them see me on TV or reading the newspaper, and that validates what they're hearing from the company, and helps build the kind of culture. Said another way, you said the football coach. I say that the job of the CEO. I certainly say it about myself, but is actually a pretty easy job, because you only have one responsibility, and that really is the culture. To me, I say the culture I want our employees to be proud, and when they see you doing stuff in the public arena, sometimes they don't agree with it, but it does contribute to them feeling proud and working for a company that's at the center of things, and making a difference. And that's important to the culture. That shows up in the way they take care of our customers. Having the high, the two worst operational days that we've had of the year, and having two of the best NPS days of the year. Those are not normally correlated, but that's people doing a great job and believing. So it does all go together.
Yeah. I want to talk numbers for a minute, not just because I know you love numbers, and you're going to know these numbers better than I am. I pulled seat share at different airports that I'm interested in, from our friends at Cirium. And it's interesting. Since you got to United in 2016, the share of seats in Chicago for United is up more than 4 points. This is mainline and regional. For everybody. Newark up 3 points in market share. Denver, the number of your seats now compared to 2016 for the month of November, it's up 72%. And now you've got 50% share in Denver, up from 41%, so up 9 points. LAX, which I find a fascinating market because it's so competitive, and at one time there were 5 airlines trying to hub there, and it's a really important market. LAX, your seats are up 9.4% over that 9-year period. Delta's up 13.5%. They're really killing it. American's down 29% in LAX. Southwest is down almost 35%. So I look at the numbers and I say you're kicking butt, but I'm curious, what changed? What has really made that happen?
First, actually, the more impressive numbers, you got the seat numbers, but in all of those hubs, our market share has grown more than our seat share. So, in Chicago, it's 15 points. Our seat share, you talked about 4 points, but our market share for the local traffic has grown 15. I think it's 17 in Denver. San Francisco's mid double digits. Across the board, we've grown market share. And there was always this innate potential at United Airlines that hadn't been realized. In fact, Michael Lindenberg, a longtime Wall Street analyst, at one of the first conferences that I went to when I first got to United, said to me and a bunch of us, he said, I remember when you were like an up and coming executive, young guy at America West in the 90s, and somebody in a room asked you if you could go to any airline, where would you want to go? And you said United Airlines because it has the most untapped potential. That was back in the 90s.
Yeah.
And it was true. And just this incredible set of hubs that they would always talk about. But, when you're trying to compete, with Southwest Airlines, you're flying a crappy 50-seat regional jet up against them, you're going to lose. But it was about far more than this growth in the schedule, which we did. It was mostly about trying to do things to win brand loyal customers. And for a long time, there's been this view in the airline industry that I had at the beginning of my career as well, that air travel is a commodity. All that matters is the schedule. And for the host of events that were impactful to me, that convinced me that was in fact wrong, that there are many customers for whom all that really matters is the schedule, but there are many customers that when the schedule is broadly similar, they'll be brand loyal to airlines. And so, to me, that was the whole march from America West to US Airways to American. That was about building a brand loyal airline. That's what, and look, the truth is I was the architect of those deals, and I was the number 2 guy, but that's what I was trying to do. And that's what when I went to United, that's what we did. It's exactly the same playbook to build an airline that customers love, employees are great, take care of the customers, and everyone can be proud of. And that helps you win market share. That gives you the ability to grow. It's hard to grow if you're not winning, share, but the growth is really more the output that came from doing things to win customer loyalty.
So when you say market share, you're measuring what, passengers or
passengers and local passengers. So it's
local passengers.
Strip the connecting customers out. What's
Gotcha.
happening to local passenger share.
Okay. So that evolution, it's interesting because clearly the Scott Kirby I first met at America West many years ago, you were a low cost guy, right? Everything had to be as in the commodity business, the lowest cost provider wins, and now you're a premium guy, or certainly at an airline that is excelling, selling premium product. Is it the customer that's changed? And I think there have been a lot of changes post-pandemic. So is it changing customers or is it changing Scott?
It's not changing customers. It's partly changing Scott. I can talk about that if you want. But it's also had a different hand of cards. You play the cards you're dealt. America West, this strategy would have never worked. Had zero chance of working. At America West, the right strategy was be as low cost as possible and just survive competing with Southwest, which was not long-term viable either. That was if you remember us going into the transcons, that was our attempt to break out. And that was my idea, and it was a bad idea, and it didn't work. But once I realized that wasn't going to work, America West did not have a viable future unless it merged and got meaningfully bigger. So that's how we got to US Airways, and we tried to do a deal with United. We did a hostile bid for Delta, which we got American done. But that was the start of the process. So it's a different hand of cards. But also I have changed my view of it. This is a longer story, but some of the interesting data points on it. The first one that was really impactful to me was when JetBlue started and put live TVs on airplanes. And I thought, what a gimmick. That's so silly. What a waste of money. And then I went and flew on it and holy cow, this makes a difference. I was wrong. And we at America West at that point, at the time, JetBlue was 12 airplanes, and we were close to 100. We'd signed a term sheet with Live TV who was putting it on for JetBlue to put live TVs on America West airplanes. We'd have been the second airline to have live TVs on airplanes. And we got, and it was a huge, the amount of money we were spending for America West was off the charts big. And got it approved at the board, and I left the board meeting. It had been my project. I left the board meeting. This would have been in the late 90s, I think, and called the CEO. He didn't call me back. This is weird, because it's putting them on the map. It's making their company 10 times bigger. And he didn't call me back for 24 hours. I called multiple times. And then he called me back and he's like, I'm so sorry, but we told JetBlue that you were going to do this deal, and they bought the whole company to keep you from doing it. That's what happened. But anyway, that was the
Wow.
starting point for me on, I needed to see it, but going and sitting on a JetBlue airplane and this was wrong. This makes
Yeah.
a difference.
Yeah. All right. So what needs to be done at United? What are you still looking to do?
We got to avoid complacency. I think we've risen to the top, and you kind of look at all kinds of things. We're not number one in everything, but you put it all together, we're number one. Our technology, our app, and our technology that underpins it is better than anyone. The way we could manage through this shutdown was unprecedented. Our employees are the linchpin. They're doing an amazing job. Our flight attendants are the face of United Airlines. They do a great job. Our gate agents are the heart of United. They do it, like across the board. Our people are doing great. We're investing in the product. We're investing about $1 billion a year extra consciously in the product and technology to push the airline forward. Another big one that's coming, started now is Starlink. It's an incredible experience compared to if you haven't flown with it. But we're going to keep investing and trying to do things that no other airline has done. We've got a process this year that we kicked off called Change the Unchangeable to start tackling issues that people just take for granted. It's impossible to solve at an airline, and so we're not going to sit still. We're going to keep up in the game. Trying to make travel easier for customers. The app is a good indication of how we do that, but all kinds of ideas for reducing friction, making it easier, giving you better information, giving you better perfect communication when there are delays. The goal on that one is we call it every flight's a story. I've asked the team. My vision for it is ultimately pretend I'm on a flight and I have called to ask what's going on with my flight. I want to tell all of our customers proactively whatever they would tell me. That's the kind of vision and things that we're trying to do to just make United be something unlike it has ever existed at any airline in the world. That's our goal.
What would be an example of something unchangeable you're trying to look at changing?
So how do we operate when lightning closes the ramp? Do we have automated? Can we have automated vehicles and things to keep operating when lightning closes the ramp? Last summer, over 90 days, there were 93 hours that the ramp in Houston was closed for thunderstorms. So over an hour a day, where you have to just shut down the operation, and you're trying to run a finely tuned machine. That's really hard to do, and those delays then bleed into the rest of the day because the airplanes and crews are going other places. So how can we operate even when there's lightning?
Interesting.
That's just one example. That's a good one.
Yeah, no, that's a good one. All right. So you have very, very publicly said the low-cost model's broken and all of that. What I'm curious about is looking forward. If we lose low-cost carriers, will air travel still be affordable without the price discipline of discount carriers? And is that something that the industry should be concerned about from a Washington perspective? Back to Washington, where those in Congress or whatever administration may feel like high airfares would be something that they would go after.
Absolutely, fair airfare is going to be affordable. Airfare is down over 50% in real terms in the last 3 decades. It's down 26% from 2019 year to date through 2025. It is absolutely affordable. Often you pay more for your Uber than you do your air travel. It is and is going to always be affordable. But I also think it's a misnomer to think that the ULCCs, I think it's just wrong that they are the ones that are driving prices down. They drive consumer discontent with all the gotcha stuff, but the full up fare, on those airlines isn't nearly as attractive as shows up in DOT statistics because it doesn't include all the gotcha stuff. And I think they've massively contributed to the discontent that consumers often have with air travel. And I'll be glad to see them gone.
Yeah. Okay. All right. What do you think the industry is going to look like in 5 or 10 years? What is there a big change coming at all?
It's probably an evolution, but I think there's going to be two large kind of revenue diverse, full service, brand loyal airlines, and then
two, not three, right?
two. There's two today, and there'll only be two. And everyone else is sort of competing for spill traffic. Not 100% competing for spill. They'll still have places where they're the dominant schedule. Charlotte, North Carolina, American will have the dominant schedule there. So most of those customers, but for most customers in the country, the other airlines are going to be competing on price. And I think collectively they'll be smaller than they are today. By the way, all of them disagree with me on this. I don't think the ULCC model will exist anymore, but there'll be plenty of, price-driven, lower-cost airlines. I mean, one of the problems with the ULCC model is they needed to take the U out of the ULCC model. That is not what consumers want. Consumers can live, price-conscious consumers can live with the low-cost model, but the U part of it didn't work.
Because they got too cheap.
And they got there's a limit to what people are willing to accept, and
right.
They found it. And like another one of their problems is, they grew big enough that they actually started to need repeat customers, and who wants to do that twice? But I think there's going to be two big there's going to be tons of competition, but the commoditized part of the business, there's going to be two airlines that are brand loyal. This is a spectrum, two large brand loyal airlines. Everyone has some brand loyal customers because of schedule. Schedule is the most important. It is the most important factor. It's not the only one. It's the most important. But the rest will, kind of be in a second tier of winning in places where they have a better schedule, but competing for spill traffic in the rest of their networks.
And of those two, do you need to catch Delta?
Well, I think we already have in most ways. Even you look financially, like we're essentially tied. And we had Newark happen this year, and you strip out the oil refinery, like we're essentially tied. But that's honestly not the way I think about it. I think about trying to, I think Delta does a really good job. We're going to do a really good job. I think we're going to pass them. But we don't have tons of really direct overlap with them. We do, but not a ton. So it's just there's more opportunity, I think, for us to take market share from airlines who are not as competitive, to be blunt. And that's what we've been doing the last few years. And we're focused on growing in our hubs. I know because I look at the data, we've picked up market share from everyone. We've picked up less new market share from Delta than we have from others, and that's to be expected. But I think that trend will continue.
Do you think Chicago will always be a two-hub airport, or will it eventually be one?
I would not want to play the other hand of cards. I'll leave it at that.
Okay. All right.
I know when to hold them, and I know when to fold them, and I know what to do there.
and you're holding those.
I'm raising on mine.
Okay. All right. Scott, I'm curious who you've learned from over the years. Who do you consider most helpful, biggest mentors?
I think actually for people to learn from, I've learned more from reading than from people I worked with. Winston Churchill is number one in my list. Abraham Lincoln is probably number two. George Patton. But I read a lot, and so you learn a lot from what other people done. I have learned a lot from watching other people. I've learned more, frankly, from watching other people make mistakes that were my bosses than I learned from positive. I don't know if that sounds bad to say, but I have. And then the only person in my entire career who ever sat down and gave me feedback was Oscar, who's on this call. And I immensely appreciate him for that. One of the things he said to me after I'd been at United a few months, I was in just the two of us were talking about. I don't even remember what we were talking about, but something like, well, here's what it would mean to employees, and like, I don't think we should do X, Y, Z because it'd be bad for our crew. And I was telling him why. He's like, he's like, I see you and you talk like this to me all the time. Everyone just thinks you're a math and numbers guy. You should, everything you just said to me, you should say to other people because you're like their best defender. Anyway, it was great advice. And he's, I don't ever remember having any kind of performance review, anything from a boss, or any kind of feedback except for Oscar.
Interesting. Okay, cool. All right. One last question. What keeps you up at night? What do you worry about?
Nothing. I'm the best sleeper, I sleep 8.5 hours at night, but the substance of the question is there's going to be something that happens that is unexpected, and I don't know what it is. And so I don't try to predict what that is. Try to do 3 things at United to let us survive any of those. And I have a North Star goal that I established for myself during COVID, and I've since made this commitment to our employees to set the airline up so that we never again have a furlough. And I believe I can't 100% guarantee that, but we're pretty close to that now. It would take something really bad for that to happen. 3 things we have to do. 1, we're carrying more cash on the balance sheet, triple the cash that we had when COVID started. We're the only airline that hasn't kind of caved into Wall Street pressure and gone back to pre-COVID cash policies, but we're doing it. We're going to do it for as long as I'm here. My guess is we're going to do it after I'm gone someday. 2 is we need to be at the top of the industry in terms of profit margins. Every time something bad happens in the industry, whoever starts at the bottom is the first one to start bleeding cash, losing money. They're the ones that have to shrink, furlough, ask for concessions, and then that makes it better for everyone else. By the way, we aren't even in a crisis, and that's happening now. You can see what's happening at airlines that aren't named United and Delta, the stress it's putting them under. And 3rd is pay down debt on the balance sheet. And, we're doing that. We're back better than we were pre-COVID. In fact, just this week, we got upgraded to the highest level that we've been since pre-9/11. We're 1 notch away from investment grade. So I believe we'll get there before long. And if we do those 3 things, we're in a position that we can survive whatever the next crisis of the day is, because there will be one, and that we can stay focused on the long term. I want our employees to know they can sleep well at night, because we've set the company up to manage through the inevitable crisis that's going to come, and they don't have to worry about it. They can just stay focused on taking care of each other and customers.
And do you worry at all that the flight attendant situation will get to a crisis, or is that going to be worked out?
I don't think, our flight attendants are the face of United. They're awesome. I love them. I am on their side. I am anxious for the union to finish collating all the results from their survey and get back and get it done. They deserve the best contract in the world. They're going to get the best contract in the world. I'm not trying to complain about the union. It is what it is. But man, they can slow it down.
Yeah. All right. Well, Scott, this has been fascinating. Thank you so much. Good luck with everything.
Okay. Thanks, Scott.
Great to check in, and let's do it again.
I'll look forward to it.
All right. Take care. And we will be right back with more on Airlines Confidential.
Promotional support provided by the ultimate AvGeek website, thearchive.net. A vast collection of airline memorabilia, timetables, route maps, rare cabin and airport photos, special flights, and more. All at thearchive.net, the hub of air transport history.
Thanks again to Scott. Always a frank and fascinating discussion. Before we go on, I want to thank Pratt & Whitney for its longtime sponsorship of Airlines Confidential. At Pratt & Whitney, the pursuit of more sustainable aviation is foundational. For decades, Pratt & Whitney has been at the forefront of revolutionary advancements in aircraft propulsion technology. And by working smarter, cleaner, and greener today, they are committed to supporting the aviation industry in its goal of reaching net zero CO2 emissions by 2050. Learn more about Pratt & Whitney's smarter technology, cleaner fuel, and greener business at prattwhitney.com.
And thanks to Infinity Flight for its sponsorship as well. As a proud partner of the American Airlines Cadet Academy, Infinity Flight delivers high-quality pilot training designed to meet the exact standards of today's commercial airlines. Infinity Flight is building the next generation of airline pilots, focused, prepared, and ready for the flight deck. Learn more at infinityflight.com, the trusted choice of aspiring aviation professionals in the world's largest airlines.
So, Oscar, Scott says United is firing on all cylinders and picking up market share, mostly from smaller airlines, and he puts American and Southwest in that category, smaller airlines than United that aren't firing on all cylinders. He says he's grown comfortable in the role of a public CEO in the political world. He's evolved from an airline executive who believed it was a commodity product, so you had to have the lowest cost, to one who now champions premium products, good service, and better technologies as keys to success. He thinks the ULCCs shot themselves in the landing gear, so to speak, by trying to be ultra low cost instead of just low cost, and as a result, pissed off too many customers and sullied the reputation for the whole industry, really. He says the best advice he's ever gotten from a boss came from you. You told him to take his support of employees public and show some heart. Me paraphrasing there, instead of just being a numbers guy. So that's a very long way of asking this question. What's your assessment of Scott Kirby's work at United?
Oh, well, that's very nice of him to say. As leaders and certainly as CEOs, there's always going to be multiple opinions on what you're doing, whether you're doing it well or not, depending on your vantage point. So it's a never-ending issue. And airline CEOs are clearly, it feels often at the center of it because we fly so many millions of people to so many different places. So Scott's doing a wonderful job. But more importantly, the task that leaders have is about developing continuity and succession. As you know, Scott, before I took over United, there had been multiple CEOs over the past decade or so. And that just creates a crazy sort of left and right, up and down sort of syndrome. So, literally job one for a new leader is to begin to develop their successor, who will provide certainly different leadership, but one of continuity along the same paths. And so we established a culture of caring and friendly and heart. And from that platform, Scott's been able to grow and build this behemoth that really has separated itself from a lot of the other players. And that takes it takes courage, it takes grit, it takes sometimes pissing a few people off here and there. But I hope he continues to remember that aspect of staying close to our employees. But the airline is flying high, and again, there's nothing, at least from my perspective, as the predecessor leader, to see what you started not only continue but also continue to grow. So, in light of all of that, I think Scott and the team he's put together, we put together, is very few new people in that environment. So it's good to see the team. I root for them incredibly hard, as you might guess. And yes. I'm glad they're representing our industry in a way that's not only friendly but also advantageous to customers. And again, we want to fly to places, and a lot of different places. And having a reliable airline that can get you there, I think, is something Scott and his team have done really well at.
Yeah, and lifted the whole industry, right? What's happened at Delta, what's happened at United, it certainly raises the bar for everybody. And I think that's a good thing long term for air travel. And
again, important. Certainly I'm biased here, but a lot of the initiatives that are happening in the industry are customer centric. Of course, you're always going to be accused of, you're gouging or you're making too much money. As you know, the margins in this business aren't significantly, profitable enough, and we hit lots of. But a lot of the investment is really focused on customers and trying to provide better clubs, provide better backseat entertainment, provide better options on so many different things. And so it is not just a pure play, at least at United, to just gain profits. It's to take you and people like us to places that we want to go in a comfortable, unique and safe and on time and friendly way.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's going to be fascinating to watch, I think, the next 5, 10, 15 years in this business, as there's a competitive reshuffling, and
no question. And then there's new products, right? There's the world of eVTOLs, the flying cars that are going to be added. You got the supersonic play. You got there's a ton. And I think that's one of the things for the listeners of this. between you and I, we're going to bring some of these exciting new players into the view, so everybody can make their own opinions. But for the first time in a long time, and again, you're the historian, there's the possibility of some really new, exciting, and revolutionary sort of advancements in how we as consumers fly. That it'll be just really fun to watch. And so I look forward to bringing some of that to your audience.
Absolutely. Great stuff. Great stuff. Well, that's all for another edition of Airlines Confidential. Thank you, Oscar, as always. Really great insights. And thanks again to Scott Kirby. Dave Hilfman, another United veteran, will be back next week, just as everyone is rushing off to grandma's for turkey. If things are really quiet, maybe I'll just be entertaining you all with my favorite cranberry recipe. Thanks for listening, everyone.
Thank you, Scott, and happy Thanksgiving to you. And that cranberry sauce sounds delicious. So everyone have a great one.
This podcast is produced by Mass Media. Info@massmedia.net.